All right, Dylan, thank you so much for jumping on episode 4 of Devspotter. It's awesome to have you, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. This is my first time on a podcast, and I'm super excited just to be doing this.
First time. Well, mate, it's a privilege to have you on for the first time. And obviously, we've spoken previously about the Fair Play Collective. I thought it was a really interesting concept. I want to hear more about it. But first, I want to learn a little bit more about yourself because I'm pretty sure that this idea was sparked from previous experience, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of backstory. I did corporate IT for years, and then I moved over to Epic Games as their internal IT, and I worked at Epic for almost 9 years as a contractor, then a full time employee, and then back to a contractor. I did internal IT for them, led support teams, supporting all of the like devs and artists and stuff like that they're in. And 2023, Epic hit layoffs, about 1,200 people. And they were really kind of one of the first big studios to do that, to lay off so many people at once. I was affected by them. I got laid off. And then like a year or 6 months later, I actually went back to work contract with them, and then they cut 11% of contractors, and so I got cut again. And really, the onus of all of this uh, uh, started with not the onus, the kind of creation of this started with that, and just me thinking through the layoffs and how that spurred a lot of layoffs from there. And it wasn't just Epic. Epic really like kind of kicked that ball
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
but there was so much hiring over the pandemic. Epic certainly did the same thing, like 1,000 people a year. A bunch of companies did that, and then there was also like a huge VC pullout at the time, where all of these venture capitalists pulled out way early on a lot of projects with just a ton of money that they were expecting to pull out way later. And so these companies felt like they needed to, get rid of a lot of people to save face and really to stay on top. And Epic was one of those. So that all happened. A lot of people got cut over the kind of the years in between. And then really it wasn't until about a month ago, whenever it was, that Microsoft laid off like 9,000 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I was talking to a neighbor friend of mine, and we were talking about taxes actually, and just how taxes are supposed to work, where you pay into a system and then the system kind of pays you back, right? And I thought, why the hell can't we do that in like video games? Why can't
Yeah.
we kind of support developers that way? And so it just started as this idea, and then my wife and kid went out of town, and I spent the next week just thinking about that pretty much by myself and throwing it against the wall and seeing what stuck. And pieces kind of came together. And then I threw it at LinkedIn and at Blue Sky, and it didn't take off like crazy, but it took off enough that a bunch of people said, "Yeah, this sounds great. How can we help?
There's something
What
there.
can we
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
this work?" Yeah, there's something there. There was clearly a hunger for it, and yeah, that's how the idea of the Fair Play Collective kind of got started. And yeah, and we're where we are today, which I'm happy to talk about too.
Yeah. So someone watching this, obviously I know a little bit about it, but someone watching this, what actually is it? Because I know it started obviously as an idea from, previous
Yeah,
experiences with yourself in the industry and we've seen the layoffs happening, and it's not just obviously the gaming industry, it's other
sure.
industries. It's, obviously the economic times are tough. So what actually is the model and what is the Fair Play Collective for, say, a developer, for a player, for an investor? What
Yeah,
does that look like?
yeah. So kind of going back to the way things currently exist, you've got the publisher developer relationship, right? Which very much is a publisher drops a whole bunch of money into a studio or a developer and says, "Hey, make your vision, make this game." And at its best, that works really well like that. But at its worst, that can lead to the publisher having a lot of creative control, adding creative pressures to the developers, retaining IPs, and all of that. When they start making money, and then when they start making money, if they do, taking a big portion of that money for the publishing company. And I was just thinking, I feel like creativity could exist outside of those pressures, and publisher pressures, as well as kind of popularity contests with players and people, in this really kind of post-capitalist consumer society that are so used to snapping up a game that looks like something they want to play, like seeing the finished product and going, I want this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that I I think that there exists a world or a group of people that can appreciate, video games as art and wanting to celebrate and support art itself. And so that's kind of at its base, at its core, is the idea that we are trying to create something where people can celebrate art, how it works. So realistically, the model is ultimately a backer supported. I want to use that word more than funded, but funded is the right word too. It's a backer supported indie game development fund, with tiers for the players to buy into, for the consumers to buy into, and they are paying in like a monthly subscription or just a single donation with various tiers on that, into this system where the idea is that we are going to pay developers to develop in this big, wide open space away from player pressures, consumer pressures, and publishing pressures to create their vision for what they want to create. And we're going to fund them based off of that backer support and that funding. The idea being that we're going to fund a living wage for wherever those people live. So ultimately, they don't have to work a second job to create this vision.
Yeah.
Because again, we believe that the vision should exist on its own without them having to scramble or without them having to worry about what's popular and what's not. So the short of it is, a developer submits the project to us. We review the project to make sure it aligns with values that the collective retains, as well as making sure that they have a proposed timeline that seems to make sense to some of our industry veterans on staff. They can look at that and say, yeah, this timeline makes sense. You can knock that out in this much time if you had a good salary for you and your developers. And then we just work with them to push it to a 1.0 status to get it to the point where it can be published. On the backer side of things, the backers can choose how to invest within the different tiers from one time to monthly, like I mentioned. The backers get tangibles every month. And what's kind of different than like Kickstarter or from Patreon on the backer side of things is that it's not on the developers, the studios, to determine what those tangibles are. We've got a list from the Fair Play Collective of here's the things that you're going to get. Now, the developers will have to agree to those things. Hey, can you put out dev diaries? Can you put out, community builds, art and stuff like that? But this is all stuff that people are putting out kind of on their own anyways, on like Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever. And then the studio gets funded monthly. So another difference between Kickstarter or a VC or a publisher is that we are going to pay them on a monthly basis based on our backer support, and also based on their check-in. So they'll have monthly check-ins with us. Again, our internal experts, our industry experts will make sure their timeline is right, make sure everything's looking good, and kind of let them go with that. And then once they get to 1.0, we kind of let them off the leash, and then they can go forth and maybe find a publisher or a launcher or something like that to kind of put their game on. All of that being that there's no top-down pressure from any of it. We are not pressuring what kind of game they're making. We're not in any kind of creative control. All of the money that we're getting, probably at first, all of the money that we're getting is going to them. I would love for, at some point, to make some money off of this and take 10, 15% off the top for some kind of, admin fees, but nothing more than that. Just kind of keep this running, to pay the people that are working for me also a living wage. But ultimately, they're getting most of the money, and they're not having to worry about what's popular, because they can just kind of make what they envision. And then they can also pivot in between, unlike a Kickstarter where you kind of hand someone a finished product at the beginning. You say, this is what it's going to look like. If you can make all that money at the, what you want to make in your Kickstarter, then you've kind of got to get there at the end, because that's what everybody's expecting. In this model, we're really striving for something that the consumers are saying, yeah, I want to support studios. I want to support developers, not necessarily a project. I'm going to pay into this knowing that something good is going to come out of it in the end. So it allows the developer to really pivot in between and say, well, this isn't really working, so let's move over to this model. That was not a short explanation of what this is.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a good explanation, because there's a lot of people probably watching this and might have seen, something about the Fair Play Collective, read the manifesto, so it is good to hear in detail what it is. So how I take it is, and I've seen with Kickstarter and developers, indie developers in particular, they are using Kickstarter a lot. And, sometimes it's at the very early stage, or sometimes it's, midway through their development journey of their game to actually finish their game. So it seems like this is an alternative, but it's almost, to me, it seems like a real network and kind of a real foundational kind of support as well. Like, it doesn't sound like it's Kickstarter, go and, raise funds as best you
Right.
can and hope for the best. Like, it just seems like this is much more than a Kickstarter. It seems like it's a real support network for indie developers.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pieces to that we're playing around with the ideas on. There are some pieces where we hopefully will be able to collaborate with marketing experts on, providing some cheaper marketing alternatives to indie studios, where we'll be able to bring on industry experts to talk, if we have a podcast, for instance, about the industry, and what it's like to be in the industry, go over various topics, and really grant insights to the developers and the backers that are interested in that kind of thing. And then also just kind of information. I'd really like to lay down a layer of information about, like, how do I make money as a developer? Like, what's the ins and outs of being a developer as a job? Because, if you're some person who's working a full-time job and then developing in your spare time, and you do that for 4 years, and then all of a sudden you find you're making money doing that, it's not intuitive as to how to keep that going as your full-time gig. But there's a lot of people that do understand how to do that, and I'd love to get their expertise and get that in writing and write some articles on that. How to avoid predatory VC funding, all of that stuff. I want to make this like a community of kind of support throughout the entire process.
I love that, Dylan, because I think that's probably the biggest opportunity. And talking to indie developers is, especially if you're a small studio, it's really difficult to be on top of everything.
Yeah.
Even just the back end sort of financials, marketing and socials and building in public. And there's just so much to it. And I love the fact that you're thinking of different ways, to build out the Fair Play Collective, because that's, something that's sort of close to our heart is obviously with the Glizzy platform is how do we add value? How do we not just be some transactional library of games? How do we, if we have developers launching their games with us, what can we provide them as a value add, whether it's marketing support, whether through our partnerships that we can help support with, a cheaper kind of or more cost-effective trailer creation, for developers. So I think that's a really good model. I think it's a really interesting concept. And funnily enough, when I did stumble across one of your posts on LinkedIn, Jack and I were actually talking about how can we think of a different kind of support/funding model for developers? What would that look like? And it was just timing, pure timing, that then I saw a post from you and I thought, this is fantastic. This is exactly the sort of stuff that we were thinking. Like
we should talk.
Yeah, we should talk.
Yeah,
and we did.
Yeah.
And we did. So I'm interested from the player perspective. So, as a player, I'm assuming the players are the backers. Is that correct, Dylan?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, assuming, yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine there'll be some people who are just like, hey, this is cool. I don't play video games, but I'm willing to back this. But yes, the target demographic is people who are playing the video games.
So they would, support the developer, the studio, and
Correct.
they would receive, ongoing perks for doing so, potentially discounted game upon launch and things like that. Is that right?
Yes. And so I want to get into that because we're still working on those perks and like
sure.
what those look like. There's a lot of kind of industry standard things, again, like kind of having a space for the developers to put out what they're working on, whether that's community builds. And one thing I wanted to point out is that this isn't necessarily an early access system.
Yes.
I think early access has its place. I think it's great when you know it's early access. I don't have any problem with that. But I don't necessarily want this, so much of this is really keep the developers in a space where they can develop without outside pressures. And that includes players to a degree, especially in a world that we live in where players they feel so entitled sometimes to ownership of a game at the end of it, to the point where we have smear campaigns and review bombing and stuff like that when something they don't like, goes awry, or something they do like goes awry. And so it's entirely up to the developer on like the community build side of things. A lot of developers really like that, like the early access stuff, and we're not against the idea. We can have it if we want, but it's not a requirement. So that being said, a lot of the perks are, dev diaries, community builds, concept art, wallpapers, icons, stuff like that, consumables that you can, digital
Yeah.
consumables. Um, you know, maybe we'll have some merchandise for Fair Play Collective and like I supported X. Definitely credits on titles depending on the tiers, as well as badges and stuff like that. And then down the road, I would really like, well, not quite down the road. Also, we'd like to ensure that all of our subscribers, all of our backers of a certain tier get a percentage off of MSRP for all game launches.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're necessarily in the place to be like, hey, if any game that comes through Fair Play is free to the subscribers, maybe someday, but we probably won't start there.
Yeah.
But definitely we could offer some kind of MSRP rebate for that. And then in the future, whatever platform we're using, I would love to have a Fair Play Collective selection, a library of rotating one free game a month for subscribers within that library that they can play. I like that idea. And then kind of tangential to all of that, like what the backers can receive. One of the things that we're really gunning for, and again, I've kind of touched on it here and there, is the idea of ownership from a player and the idea of, well, I want to play this game because I like this kind of game and I know this game and I want to challenge that. I think that that exists. And I think that's totally valid. But the thing is, there are so many platforms for that already, right? That already exists in Steam and Kickstarter and everywhere that exists. That is the model. The other model is, I want to support this as a medium and I know that good things come out of this medium, right? Yeah. Andy, who's on, he's working with me, he's our business developer. He likes to point out that like Blueprints, for instance, was a game that if he had looked at from the start, if it had a Kickstarter, he would never have paid for that because it's not a game that appeals to him. He sunk like 80 hours into that game when it came out because he was able to play it. And so I just want to develop that kind of feeling for players to say, I know that good can come out of this and that's what I want to support. Not necessarily knowing exactly what's going to come out at the end of the game, but I know that good video games can come out of paying people well to create their vision. And so with that is also a humanizing side of thing that I think needs to happen. Right now, it's really easy to see this like void, this black hole of creation, not knowing who creates it and seeing the end product and not ever connecting that to a person.
Yes.
If you are into comics, if you are into sports, most likely for comics, you know who the artist is, you know what that artist's style is, you know a lot about that artist, you know what they've done in the past, what they're into. The same with sports, you know all the teammates and who they are and what they do. Developers, you don't really have that. And I'm not trying to build up like superstar celebrities or anything like this, but at the same time, I think we could do a lot with personal vignettes, day in the life slices, identifying the people behind the games from a player's perspective, and then going, oh yeah, I know this developer style in the next iteration or whatever, and I've seen what they can do, even if they've been at different companies. I can see their touches and their flavors within this, and I think that can also be part of the player experience, and hopefully that helps kind of shift that attitude, or at least create another space for that attitude. I don't think we're going to change the world here, but I'd love to create more of a space for that because we already have space for everything else.
It's funny you say that because that's the exact reason we started the Devspotter podcast. Was there's so many amazing developers, and it's like, who is that person behind this brand or this this logo?
Yeah.
And we wanted to unearth developers behind the game and actually have community or people who are following this particular title actually know who's building it. So it's really interesting you said that, and it's probably a good segue into obviously the rise of indie games for me is just really taken off in the last sort of couple of years. So I'm kind of interested to hear, I guess, what's your take on one, obviously the gaming industry as it stands now, but in particular, the indie gaming scene.
Yeah. So it's easy to throw around words like the indie or the gaming ecosystem is broken and stuff like that. And it kind of is, in that there are a lot of big problems with it. Nothing is truly broken such that it can't be fixed or it doesn't evolve, right? Things always do. I will say that, for AA and AAA studios, it's kind of a nightmare. You really, really have to luck out into something really great. And even if you do, I made so many friends that I keep up with every day for the last year, and I haven't been on FX property in a year at Epic, and there were times at Epic where I was like, I could do this as a career. Like I could spend the next 25 years being here doing this, and that didn't matter to Epic the business, right? And that's really the thing with these big studios is that they're businesses first and foremost. And I'm not saying that like indie developers are not that. They are out to make money for the most part, and that's okay. You've got to make your money. You've got to make a living wage. But at the same time, it's not the same kind of creature as a big AAA studio that just kind of churns through people and uses those people as tools far more than their creative abilities and who they are. For indies themselves, indies went through a renaissance. I don't even remember 5-10 years ago, especially with whatever Nintendo called indies. They had a name for it, but they came out with something catchy and put a lot of money into indies, and it was great. And then that kind of what happened with that, I feel like, and I'm not an industry expert, so anyone can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like what happened there is people saw that and went, great, I can make this thing that I've wanted to make because there's funding there. And there was funding there for a long time. And then that funding kind of fell apart. And we are really in a stage right now where people really want indies. And I feel like the environment is people really are seeing these AAA and AA's, laying people off and letting people go and ruining livelihoods and making really bad business decisions with their games and their purchases and all of that, and saying, oh, I want something independent. I want these indie games. But then on the reality, the side of it that's not those people are the publishers and the people with the money that just aren't handing it out that much to indies anymore. And I don't know if that's because of the VC pullout, if that's a fear of market currently, but it's just there isn't a lot of funding right there for indies. So it's almost where you have an oversaturation of people who were inspired by this indie renaissance and said we can make games and have been doing that for a few years and are now at a point where they go, well, but nobody's paying us for them. And it's hard for them to be found, to be seen, especially on behemoths like Steam. Visibility is rough. So that's so much of what this is, right? And what you're doing, what I'm doing is creating visibility and creating space where they can create these things without all of that over their head, worrying about it, at least while they're making things.
Yeah. It's an interesting take, and everything you just said, I completely agree with. And you're right, that is why, you're creating the Fair Play Collective, and we've created Glizzies for that exact reason. Yeah. So I guess in closing, Dylan, it's been awesome to catch up and chat to you again, mate, and learn more about the Fair Play Collective. But for anyone who's interested in, reaching out, how do they get in contact with you, whether they're a developer, a gamer who want to be involved, or, kind of support the mission?
Sure. And I want to say that, sometimes that gets said and it's not really meant. It's meant here. Reach out to me. Reach out to the Fair Play Collective. I'm going to answer your email personally. I've had a couple of people who are like, oh, I didn't expect a response. I'm like, well, it's only like 3 people right now. So, and so many of these ideas that I've already talked about, I also want to point out, have come from awesome. I've had, I don't know, 3 dozen conversations in the last month with just everyone all over the industry, producers and developers and players. And some of these ideas have come from those people who are like very willing to be like, hey, what would be a cool idea? And I'd be like, that's a great idea. Let's roll with that. Yeah. They've not been all my ideas. So that in mind, I have a LinkedIn account for the Fair Play Collective. It's just like fair-play-collective on LinkedIn. And then also Blue Sky. I think Blue Sky is fairplaycollective.org. So at fairplaycollective.org. And then we have a website. You can go to fairplaycollective.org as a website. It's not great. We're working on it. We've got another one that's fairplaycollective.super.site. But ultimately, if you want to reach me, so those socials, they stay. I've got a parallel. Whatever I write in LinkedIn, I shorten it and I add it to Blue Sky. So whatever you're following, you're going to get the same information. But then email hello@fairplaycollective.org goes directly to my inbox. It's a Proton email right now, so that's what you're going to get back, not fairplaycollective.org. But yeah, in the future, coming soon, because I've got a couple of community marketing folks now. We are going to have a public Discord. We are going to, like I mentioned to you earlier, I'm going to go and round up a bunch of socials. So Insta, TikTok, I don't know, the other ones out there, maybe X. And then something that's close on the radar that I'm working on actually this week is a newsletter. Because I know a lot of people really connect with just being able to put in their email on the website and say, hey, keep me informed. I don't want to have to watch socials to do this. So I'm working on a newsletter, getting that out as soon as possible. But yeah, that's how to stay in touch with us. And like I said, honestly, hello@fairplaycollective.org. Email me. I want to talk to you. We'll have one of these discussions.
I can confirm because that's literally how it happened with
That's
me.
how we met.
I sent you a DM on LinkedIn and I got a response straight away.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, DM on LinkedIn too. Whatever, man. Just reach me and I will reach back.
And I think that's why it's so great because obviously it's, early stage and, but what I think's great about this is, building that network and connecting with people within the industry,
Absolutely.
get an opportunity to shape what the Fair Play Collective can and will look like. So I think it's a really great initiative, Dylan, and super thankful for jumping on Devspotter. And I wish you all the best and we'll stay connected, man.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.